back to the She Inspires podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, board certified family medicine physician, wellness and weight loss specialist, owner of the membership medical practice in Las Vegas, Inspire Primary Care. And I am so excited for us to be back to talk about all things health and wellness, how we're balancing business and wellness as busy women. This is our safe space on the She Inspires podcast on how we balance business and wellness as busy entrepreneurs or corporate baddies, and just how we are doing all the things, balancing all the hats. I have a super special guest today I'm excited about, all right? And it is Dr. Toya Lucis Sampson, aka Dr. Toya. I'm going to give her a little intro, and then Doc, I'm excited for you to introduce yourself. But she is a wife, she is a mom, a board certified OBGYN. She's a perinatal mental health specialist, a coach, and entrepreneur. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Toya.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. Let the She Inspires fam know a
Mhm.
little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I am Latoya Lucia Sampson. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, born and raised, and came to undergrad for the first time to this country at Howard University, the best, the one, the only. And I was there for medical school and undergrad and trained in Philadelphia and then moved out to Northern California, where I've been living ever since. Met my husband out here, had burnout number 2 and 3 out here, and now I'm helping women, physicians, physician moms just thrive in medicine and motherhood without complete self sacrifice. And it is my passion. I also have a podcast called Stethoscopes and Strollers. And I love spreading the message of self prioritization for
I love it.
moms everywhere.
I love it. We have very
Yeah.
similar interests in that. As
Yeah.
a busy mom, entrepreneur, physician, it's an ongoing, intentional challenge to
Hmm.
balance all the hats and try to show up in each role and each gifting at our best. And so
Yeah.
I love that your mission is to help specifically physician mothers and entrepreneurs to balance those things. So we're going to have a great chat today with
Mhm.
you dropping the gems. Okay. So, ladies, regardless if you are a physician mother or if you are in a different profession, these are still going to be really helpful conversations and dialogue and gems for busy women of all professional backgrounds. So I'm
Definitely.
excited. So tell us, Dr. Toya, about your journey in medicine and becoming an OBGYN in particular, and how that transitioned into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so I am one of those people who I was a child and I said, you know what? I want to be a doctor for no apparent reason. It was like something that smart children did, and I was a smart child.
Crazy.
And exactly, right? So I wanted to be a pediatrician. And then when I was in high school, I heard my friends talking about sex, and I was like, I don't know much, but I know what you are saying is not right. Like
Mm,
we were in that kind of preteen stage. So it was a lot of, I think I'm grown, but I'm really not. And these are all the things that I think that I've heard. And I just remember saying, I want to be more educated about my body and the things that are going to happen to me because I don't like this feeling of not knowing. And I feel like what I'm getting is like dangerous information. Even then, I knew that that education was important. So I actually got into the field because of the education portion of it and through gynecology. And most people, talk about being an OBGYN, they're like, oh, I love delivering babies, but it really was not that. I actually hadn't seen a baby being born until I was already in medical school. And I had never wavered from wanting to be an OBGYN, but that's how I got started in it. And then, of course, I saw my nephew being born and I was like, oh, this is great. It's a good thing I like it. And it's so funny now, like I only do obstetrics at this point. So
you
that's how
only do
I,
obstetrics?
yeah,
Oh, wow. Most
yeah,
OBGYNs, I hear the opposite. They transition into
right.
only doing gynecology.
Right, but it's because, and that's part of my burnout story, because I was full scope. I loved doing surgery, I loved doing laparoscopy, and I was just very burnt out and very unhappy in my job. And locums was the easiest thing for me to do, which was travel doctoring, for those who don't know. And it was just so much easier to do obstetrics only. And the stress of having to deal with the surgery, potential complications, having, readmits and all of those things was just something I was not interested in. And for the type of work that I wanted to do, where I would go work, do something I really love, and then be able to leave and have like a separation, it's very easy to just do obstetrics in that way because I've been doing locums for the last 2 years. So that's how I transitioned there.
So you're an OBGYN, you're working
Hmm.
locums because that was
Hmm.
easier than the complications of dealing with the surgeries and the readmits. And where does entrepreneurship come in the journey? Why did that come in the journey? Tell us about
Yeah,
that transition.
that was a very quick story that is actually very long. So
Yeah.
let me go back a bit. So I always say my first burnout story started in residency. And it was a very tough time for me. I was very well trained, but just felt that it was not a place that was welcoming for me and the type of personality that I had. My work was always excellent, but it's just personality wise, it wasn't a great fit.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I really just did not want to be there. And I started, having thoughts that when I was crossing the street, I was like, if I can just get hit a little bit, just
Hmm.
so I can get clipped so that I wouldn't have to go to work,
Wow.
I would be okay. Not, no, I wouldn't be seriously hurt or anything like that, but I just wouldn't have to go to work. I would be okay.
Mm.
And at that time, I just accepted it. At that time, I actually joked about it with my friends because you're so in it, like you don't even realize how bad it is.
Yeah.
And as things progressed, I was like, I know I'm never going to be this unhappy again. I'm making a decision because when I graduate, I have choices. In residency, you don't have a lot of choices. You just have to finish.
Hmm.
So when I left and came out here to California, I had my first attending job, and that I didn't have the good support that I needed to grow my skills as a surgeon at that time. So I went to a second job, which was a large corporate medical system here in Northern California. And it was great in terms of what I came for, which was the mentorship to grow my surgical skills. But it was in general understaffed. My office in particular was really poorly managed, and I was burning out again, but in survival mode and in the context of a really well paying job with really, really good benefits.
Mm.
So I just had my head down and was working, and the pandemic happened.
Hmm.
And I was also had a baby during the pandemic. So, like, right? Like many people, I was like, you know what? Life is short. I'm going to start a business in the setting of already being burnt out and not even realizing it. And it
Yeah.
actually had nothing to do with medicine. It had nothing to do with coaching. It was a directory for Black owned businesses and Black professionals who serve the Black community. It was called
Hmm.
By Default. And the idea was that when you came to the site, you knew that everything there was made for us, and because everything was Black by default. So we weren't the other, we were just the normal at my platform. So I didn't know anything about business. So I said, let me get some help. So I joined a business coaching program, and it is through that coaching program that I really learned the lessons that, one, helped me get out of burnout, but two, made me into the entrepreneur that I am right now. I really learned the value that I had as a physician, as, somebody who has really highly skilled, a high level of skills that are very transferable, and that I didn't really need to take the treatment that I was getting because I knew that I can do something else. So it is in learning those lessons, I was empowered to then leave my job because I knew that I could do something else. And at that time, it was no real plan that I had, but I knew I could do locums. So I ended up quitting my job with no real plan. I didn't give a whole lot of notice either because we have that luxury here in California.
Hmm.
And I took a month off, and which I recommend to anybody who can swing it financially, to take as much time off between jobs as possible, especially physicians. And I started credentialing for a hospital to do locums and started doing that. And I ran my locums business like the business that it is. And actually, by default, kind of sunsetted because it became one of those things where it was like a really expensive passion project. And I was like,
Yes.
okay, this is probably not going to be the business for me, but it was something that was so dear to me.
Hmm.
Um, that I will ever be grateful for that experience because it taught me so much, it empowered me so much, and has led me to what I'm doing right now. So that's how the initial transition into entrepreneurship happened.
Got it. I mean, and I don't want to glaze over, what you said. You thought about, could I just be grazed by a bus? Like, who thinks about, and it's more people than we
Right.
realize, being grazed by a bus. And buses don't graze people, right?
Well,
And but seriously, I
I didn't know
understand
that it was a
like,
bus,
okay,
but
I didn't
by
want to get
something.
seriously hurt, but just
Yeah.
enough where I don't have to work. And I don't think people understand in the physician community, we know how high suicidal thoughts, suicide
Mhm.
is in our community, very, very high. Especially with female physicians, but just those thoughts that regardless
Mhm.
of career, whether you're a physician or not, these happen with burnout. And just having safe spaces where we can admit that and where we
Yeah.
can talk about that and then talk about solutions on how those of us who are still here, right, and made it out of
Yeah.
those seasons, what was the light at the end of the tunnel? What did bring us out of that? We need more safe spaces to talk about that. So thank you for being transparent in that being a turning point in your journey. I know that I was very burnt out in residency, which I was like, if I do this after graduating residency, I'll be looking for some buses to graze me, right? And
Right.
so I knew
Right.
like, okay, thank you, Lord, for telling me about direct primary care and membership practices where I can actually have joy in primary care. And I was, blessed enough to be able to start that straight from residency. But I was on the path of severe burnout. And people sometimes don't understand when you want to be a doctor since you're a child, like both of us, and that dream comes true, that the dream doesn't always look exactly like you envisioned it as a child, right? And so the struggle with, okay, it's high paying, but that doesn't necessarily mean joy, especially if you can't
Mhm.
take care of people and the environment isn't healthy and all of the things that you were talking about. So thank you for sharing that part of the journey, which led to coaching. So we talked about how the sunset of by default,
Directory.
by
Yes.
default. How did we transition into coaching and
Yeah.
why? Who are you coaching?
Yeah, so that's a whole other separate burnout story, if you could imagine it. So when by default, was no longer like a true entrepreneurial venture, I was running my locums business, and also it reignited my love for teaching, which, with the education and everything of why I wanted to be an OBGYN in the first place, it was just this natural thing that actually residency kind of put out in me. So
Mhm.
I was so excited to start doing that. I started doing patient education online. I had a pretty decent TikTok following, and I was doing a lot of volunteering for maternal health organizations, all of these things, and just growing my brand, starting to do speaking. And I got pregnant, which was planned. And the pregnancy itself was very painful. So I
Mm.
actually had to stop working pretty early. But because I was doing everything that I wanted to do, I had full control of my schedule. I was doing all of these things that were filling me up in different ways. I thought that it was going to be a great experience. And my last experience was COVID. So I was like, this is going to be great. We're going to have help. My mom is going to be here. Nobody has to tell me when I can go back to work. I can do all the things. That was not the case. So instead of it being this wonderful postpartum experience, I was in a lot of physical pain
Mm.
because I had a lot of like SI joint, like joint pain, tailbone pain. Breastfeeding was excruciating for me. And I had a lot of mental anguish as well. I had what I now know is undiagnosed postpartum depression and anxiety. And it displayed itself for me as anger, and anger towards my husband, and the fact that I didn't feel like I was getting the support that I needed. But also, I wasn't acting like if I needed that much support because I was in this entrepreneurial journey and I had seen other moms work through having the baby and postpartum. I always quote look at my wedding planner. She was pregnant, had her baby, and continued planning my wedding. I was like, I could do that.
Right.
I have full control. So that's what I did. I kept creating for TikTok. I was at an in person speaking event 6 weeks postpartum, like doing all the things until it all came crashing down. And I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I need a break from all of you. So we were already going on a trip to Mexico for my birthday. This was about 2.5 months postpartum. And I sat my husband down and I said, I need a real break. Y'all stay here. I'm just going to go. And I was going to go on the trip by myself. And he was obviously very surprised because, we were fighting and stuff, but he didn't think it was that bad. So he said, well, this is not happening. You're not going anywhere by yourself. First of all, that's dangerous, but I think we need to go together. So my sister came from Trinidad to help my mom with the kids, and he and I went alone and really started actually talking and listening to each other, started just healing. And I had to take a step back and say, what am I really doing? What is really important in this time? And it is me. So if I want to model how I should be taken care of, I need to actually take care of myself. So I dropped everything that I was doing. By then I was about to start going back to call to doing OBGYN work. So I did that, but everything else I stopped. Actually got some physical therapy for all the pain that I was having, and got a therapist for, all of those things, because I even tried to treat myself at one point, like many doctors try to do. And as I was coming out of that, and it was in the process of figuring out how to treat myself, that I found perinatal mental health, and, really saw that there was a gap in the way that we as OBGYNs cared for women in this postpartum season. And as a society, we just assume that people just bounce back at 3 months, everything's fine, everything's good. And I felt really strongly about helping other moms not have to go through what I went through. So I was trying to see, how can I help others avoid this? Because at my core, I'm a teacher and I'm a healer. That's what I'm called to do, and it's what I feel like I'm very good at. So it was a very normal transition. But initially, because I'm a doctor and I wasn't really in the coaching space, I set it up as a medical program. So I was going to do group medical visits,
Got
and
it.
it was the idea of doing a holistic postpartum care beyond just the 3 months of the fourth trimester. So,
Mhm.
really covering the entire year of the postpartum journey. And I even launched it as that, and really quickly realized that there wasn't a whole lot of medicine that I was practicing. And I thankfully got a lot of advice to say, well, this really sounds like coaching. Like, what medicine are you actually going to be practicing? And it was a hard truth, because I did not necessarily consider myself a coach at that point, even though I truly believe many good physicians coach their patients every single day. And so I felt comfortable with what my content was going to be and the knowledge that I had. But it took a while for me to really accept that I didn't need to make this a medical program. And having that very narrow lens was a little bit of fear of going outside of something that I knew so well and going into something that was fairly new. So I made the leap and made it a coaching program. But because I knew it was something new, I knew I had the skills, but it was still something new and different. I did get another mentor who I had seen coach, had experienced her amazing ability, and said, I want this person to help me grow my skills so I can serve at the highest level, because my physician moms deserve nothing less. So I started working with a private coaching mentor instead of doing like a certification program or anything like that. And she also used to certify coaches in the past. So that's how I got started. And then in coaching, like my very first client, her child was actually older than the 1 year that I was focusing on at the time. And I realized that many of the same issues that women have in the beginning continue on. And it's really this foundational time that we need to learn how to take care of ourselves, how to set boundaries and say no and get all the help and do all the things so that you can be the mother that you want to be, and also pursue all of your other things like entrepreneurship, like medicine. So that's how it evolved into Dr. Toya coaching.
Got it. And so let's talk about tools and strategies for the
Mm,
listeners. So we've heard the journey and how
mm,
come to where the burnout happened multiple times along your
yeah.
journey, and some of the tools that you used, which were really switching careers that were better fit in each season. So for the listeners who are busy professional women,
Mhm.
balancing many hats, may be experiencing seasons of burnout, what are some tools and strategies that they could apply that you found helpful when you coach?
Yeah. So, I always go from the personal experience and then with the clients that I help. And the biggest thing for a busy mom is the shifting of what it means to you to be the best mom that you can be. And usually that comes with you don't need to do every single thing. So you need to have help and outsource. That is my biggest tip to anybody is to get your help, build your village. And if you don't have it for free, then definitely pay for it because the ideas that we have about motherhood are really weren't built for the amazing things that we are doing right now. Like having a DPC practice doesn't mean that you are cooking every single meal at every single meal time and sewing clothes and doing whatever else my mother used to do, right? It's just kind of unrealistic. So getting as much help as possible and in very creative ways, and it doesn't always mean spending a lot of money. I think people assume that it's like, oh, just throw money at it, but it can be in asking somebody to do drop offs and pickups because their child goes to the same school, or having your mother come and live with you for a couple months while the baby is small. Just different things like that. That's the other tool that I think is very powerful, not just for moms, but for women in general, is to ask. And it may seem like a very simple thing, but it is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And it doesn't mean that you are helpless. It doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing. Just asking is like a superpower, and you'll be amazed at what people will do for you if you just ask.
Yeah, asking and outsourcing so important. I have really been in a season of outsourcing and
Yeah.
delegating. I talk about that on the podcast,
Yeah.
a growing team and growing
Hmm.
support. And it does often sound to people like, "Oh, girl, that's expensive."
Right.
So I love that you shared some examples of how that doesn't have to mean expensive. I
Yeah.
think when I share it, people don't believe me necessarily when I tell
Right.
them it doesn't have to be expensive. But I definitely have found ways to get creative, to
Mhm.
outsource and to delegate. And so I want to hear some of your examples. I've shared some on the
Mhm.
podcast, but what are some examples of some ways you've outsourced that have been helpful for you?
Yeah, so we do childcare is the biggest one for us. We have an au pair, and for those
Nice.
who don't know, that's a foreign, I was going to say student. Yeah, a student that comes and lives in your home with you and does the childcare. It ends up being a lot cheaper than a nanny. For a lot of physicians and people who need to use all of the hours. So that's our biggest one. And I also no longer do laundry. My housekeeper comes every single week and she does laundry as well. And I no longer do cooking because I hate cooking. And that's something else that I think is important to mention. When you're outsourcing, it doesn't mean that you take away things that you love and that bring you joy and that bring you closer to your children. So if you all love cooking and that's something you do together, by all means do it. That is not my me. So I don't do it. And then the same with driving. I don't have a driver, but say we go to the airport or I have a very long drive, I will hire somebody. And that may sound like super elitist, but you can it's the same as taking an Uber. It's you can ask somebody to drive because especially as an entrepreneur, that's a lot of time where you could be doing other things or you could even be sleeping. So it's something else that we do in addition to like the meal prep. And I have a personal assistant that also sounds fancy, but I tell you she's not. She's virtual, so it's very affordable. Yeah, those are the main ones that I do currently.
So I'm going to get in your business on these
Yeah.
because it does sound fancy to people,
Yeah.
right? And some of these I utilize as well. For
Mhm.
example, with laundry, I've
Mhm.
shared I don't fold laundry. I throw them in the wash, but I don't fold them and put them away. But I
Mhm.
pay my mom to do that. Okay, very
I
transparently, I pay
love
her.
it.
She's already going to be over here with her grandkids. So when she's over here with her grandkids, she folds my laundry and puts it away. I pay her something once a month, and it's affordable because it's my mom, right? And
Yes.
so that's been a very helpful way
Mhm.
for us to do that. But what are some ways? Because for some women, it's like, but how do you find it? And how do you find
Mhm.
it affordable? For me, I don't clean, right? And
Mhm.
I tell people, I let the cleaning company that was highly recommended know this is my budget for cleaning.
Yep.
Okay. So what can you clean in this house under
Right.
this budget? And that's what we did. They said, oh, we can do all these spaces. We can just leave out the
Yeah.
guest house. We can, and I'm like, okay, perfect. Let's do everything but the guest house. We'll just do the guest house when we're hosting.
Right.
And so perfect. Now that's within my budget. And okay, I don't need you to come every week. You can come every other week. Perfect. So it's not about if you should outsource,
Right.
it's how you should
How?
outsource. And so, and I think people having specific examples of how that looks
Hmm.
makes it more doable and
Yeah.
makes it more realistic for people. So let's talk about this virtual assistant.
Hmm.
So how did you find them?
Hmm.
Just in general, so women can have some examples. I'll share
Yeah.
how I found mine too, but go ahead.
Yeah, I've had virtual assistants for like the last 3 years. Actually, when I started by default. Yeah, because I couldn't. I was a full scope OBGYN at that time.
Yeah,
And I used an agency. It was called Pineapple Staffing. There are tons of agencies. That one is based in the Philippines.
yeah,
And it was cheaper. It's $8 an hour.
yeah.
And they're the same company like for people like you that would need like a healthcare VA. They
Hmm.
have a branch for that as well, and I think they cost like $10 to $12 an hour.
Yeah.
So I have the same one that I have had for like 3 years,
That's
and I don't know. I guess hopefully they don't hear this, but I poached her. She now works for me directly.
nice.
So,
I've heard of
um, but we've had like such a good long relationship that it was actually pretty nice. But there are a lot of agencies that you can use. But the most important thing is knowing exactly what you want, because you can waste a lot of time and a lot of money
yeah,
with a person that is not very helpful, but it's also because you didn't give them a whole lot of leadership. And this is not judgment. This is from experience of a lot of wasted time and money
yeah.
with VAs. So you can pay as little as $5 an hour. You can pay as much as 30 something. It all depends, and more doesn't necessarily mean higher quality.
Exactly. Yeah. Same. The virtual assistants I use. So we have a US based assistant for our
Hmm.
practice. We met at urgent care so that we knew that we vibed well. So that just
Yeah.
God just blessed that. But then as we brought on more team, we did also use an agency from the Philippines, and they have
Hmm.
been awesome. We have a
Yeah.
content assistant. We have a practice assistant. We'll be bringing on an executive assistant, like for
Hmm.
personal need. But that has been really helpful for me. So it's
Yeah.
good to hear that that has worked well for you as well. And there are lots of agencies. So the au pair, what country was your au pair from?
So we are in the middle of au pairs right now because the last one did not work out, but
Got it.
they have all been from South Africa
South Africa.
because, yeah. So for us, we only want Black people in our house. There's no other way to say it. So that's why she's been from South Africa. The company that we use, Cultural Care, they don't have a lot of other au pairs who are of African descent. So they all end up being from South Africa. And we are in the process of looking for another one, but it's all through an agency. They have to come through an agency. It's actually a state program. So anytime you hear that somebody's getting an au pair outside of an agency, it may not exactly be legal.
Mhm.
So we go through the agency route.
Nice. And with the cooking aspect,
Hmm.
are is it a chef? Is it a meal prepping service?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So I wanted a chef, but in my area, it was very difficult to find people who were reliable. There's a lot of, oh, I contact you and then nobody followed up. But I
Mhm.
was persistent because I knew this was very important because we really don't like cooking and it was starting to affect the quality of the meals and the quality of our eating habits,
Yeah.
right? So then it's when you think about it that way, it's like I want myself and my kids to be healthy. Am I going to burn myself out and try and do it? Or are we just going to eat out, which is probably what's going to happen. So let me put the effort into finding somebody.
Right.
So we found somebody who does the cooking in her home and then drops it off for us. So it's like a meal prep, but I don't have to do anything. And
Yeah.
it's fresh every week. We want to be plant based. We're not strict about it, but her service is plant based. And then we just, add things here and there. And it has been an absolute lifesaver.
Thank you for digging into the outsourcing a little bit more in detail
Yeah.
because, like I said, we hear a lot of generalizations like, oh, just
Hmm.
outsource this and outsource that. And then people
Yeah.
are left overwhelmed and
Yep.
unsure where to go, even
Yeah.
if they feel like it is within budget, right? So,
Yeah.
ladies, it does not have to be super expensive. It does not have to
Hmm.
be overwhelming. Highly recommend outsourcing the things that don't give you joy. And I love that you
Yeah.
emphasize that. The things I outsource are the things that do not give me joy, that overwhelm me, that
Hmm.
bog me down. And the things that I really enjoy, like the parts of homeschooling where I'm,
Hmm.
being my daughter's Spanish teacher.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could outsource that, but I really enjoy that
Yeah.
time, right? And so I'm not outsourcing that. So at least in this season. And so,
Right.
so I love that you emphasize that that. I always like to ask about books and podcasts, especially
Hmm.
from entrepreneurs and just busy
Hmm.
women. I like to know, what are you listening to? What are you reading? What has been impactful along your journey?
Yeah, so three books that I feel like really changed my life, actually,
Hmm.
with and those were read within the last year. So Unbound, I don't know if do you know that book?
I've seen the
Yeah.
cover, but I haven't read
Yeah, yeah. Unbound, A Woman's Guide to Power, I think is the full name.
it.
And that's where a lot of my teaching about asking has been developed from, because I feel very aligned in the way that she talks about it. I always tease people and say, well, she's a dominatrix. And that perks people's ears up
Mhm.
when they hear that. But it really opens up a lot of ways that we can use the tools that we already have as women to be powerful and feel powerful without the stereotypical idea of what power is. And it's all based on desire and attention. And that really resonates with me. And I use it every day. And it's a very helpful tool to help my clients as well. The other was The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Um,
Never heard of that one.
Oh yeah. He it's about a lot of different things, but he talks about how when you achieve a lot and you get to a certain point, if you are uncomfortable with that level of success, you sabotage yourself to bring it back
Mhm.
down to a level where you are comfortable.
Wow.
Um yeah, and so it's called like an upper limit problem. And what was a big takeaway from me and for my marriage as well is this concept of taking responsibility in conflict, where instead of having 100% responsibility shared between the two people who are in the conflict, or even like countries, this can be generalized to anybody who is in conflict. Each person involved has 100% of the responsibility. So it's taking on that kind of radical ownership of your choices and, your life. And that really resonated with me and with my husband. And it's really helped us with like arguments and stuff, because no matter how wrong I know you are, I still have to take responsibility for my side and 100% of it. So that was great for us. And then Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy wrote two books that were great, and they really should be read together, I think. 10x is easier than 2x. Who Not How. And that goes into the delegation outsourcing part of it. So those are the ones that I recommend to a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs.
Love it. I love those. I think the only one I've read out of the ones you just mentioned was the 10x,
Yeah,
letter 2x. So
yeah,
you've added some books to my
yeah,
Audible list. I love knowing what to read and listen to next,
yeah.
because there's just so much out there to learn.
Yes,
Like, being a lifetime learner is just a commitment, because we want to evolve. We want to be the best version of ourselves, and we're either going to learn it through learning from others, or
that's right.
life is going to knock us down and we'll figure it
Exactly.
out eventually. Okay, thank you for sharing those. And how are you balancing business and wellness in this season?
So wellness is like it's not even business and wellness, it's wellness and wellness. Like
Okay.
I truly believe in putting myself, my health and my well-being first, because I know what happens when I don't, and then everything else gets integrated around that. And that includes my husband and that includes my children. So I take care of me first. And when I do that, I can be such a better mom. I can be such a better wife and a doctor and all the things. So it is a priority for me. So much so that today I had my bi-weekly 90-minute massage.
Yes.
And, it's one of those things that I started not as a luxury, recommended by my physical therapist, because I was in so much pain. So I
Wow.
was doing, therapeutic massages by a masseuse that had a special certification that I can't remember exactly what it is, but she really helped with a lot of the hip pain and things that I was having. And I
Mhm.
just continued because my job is physical. Like
Yeah.
being an OBGYN, I would come home and be sore everywhere, like if I just, ran a marathon. So it became this regular thing. And then I just continued because it is a time now where I go and I'm with my own thoughts and I heal my body and I have this really enjoyable thing that I do. But on a more regular basis, I take time for myself every single day. And that doesn't mean 5 hours of lounging by my non existent pool. It's like 7 minutes of meditation in the morning. It's writing a couple sentences of gratitude to start my day. Like those little things may seem simple and like a nothing, but it's the intentionality of this is my time. So if I look at my baby monitor and my daughter's up, but I haven't done my meditation, it's like, okay, well, she can wait 7 minutes. Nothing's going to happen to her. So I have this quiet time just for me. And the same with the gratitude, because I feel like that's a really nice way to start the day. And I went into that much detail because we often think it has to be this big elaborate thing, and it
Yeah.
really doesn't. We can start somewhere. And I think just taking time for yourself that is truly for yourself is essential for wellness for anyone.
Absolutely. And we talk a lot and we hear a lot about morning routines, right? And
Mm-hmm.
something about the word morning routine makes it sound long and
Yeah.
drawn out, right? And like this morning, for example, like my prayer time, I like to start my day with prayer and Peloton
Yeah.
or prayer and pickleball, prayer and fitness essentially.
Right.
And my prayer time, I had a prayer list of people I'm praying for. So
Mm-hmm.
that took a few minutes. I, did a quick devotional. So altogether it was maybe 8 minutes. I
Yeah.
wasn't timing it, but it was time with God. And then, went down to my little home gym and I was like, oh, I don't have as much time as I thought I had.
Yeah.
Let me put on a 15-minute full body strength. And I was like, 15 minutes is better than no minutes. And I felt so good. The squats and the crunches that got done and the biceps and the push-ups that got done within that 15 minutes, it was better than no minutes.
Yep.
And so it doesn't have to be long and drawn out. And it is the consistency and the intentionality. And these are the things I try to really share and apply in my own life. And so
Yeah.
it's just nice to hear how other busy professional women are actually doing that and showing up in that in their lives as well, and what's working and what's not working, right? And so thank you for sharing that. So where can the fam find you on socials and stay connected with you?
Yeah, so everything starts on my website. So it is drtoyacoaching.com. So it's DRTOYA coaching.com. And there you'll find my podcast, which is called Stethoscopes and Strollers. And all of my socials are connected there, but I am at Dr. Toya Coaching on Instagram and my full name, Latoya Lucia Sampson, on Facebook. And I have lots of resources for not just physician moms. That's my niche because I love us and we're the best. And, we relate on a different level, but it's really helpful for all moms, definitely professional women in general, because the tools that I use, outsourcing, prioritizing yourself, that's anybody. We're all in our selfish season. That is not a bad thing.
Thank you so much for sharing just your journey, the ups and the downs and the transparency of the journey, what's transitioned you into a season of career that you really have been thriving in and enjoying, and how the balance and the outsourcing has looked. So thank you for sharing all of that. Definitely stay connected with Dr. Toya. For those of you who are listening, please share this episode and the She Inspires podcast with other busy professional women in your life who are balancing business and wellness and all the things. We want to stay connected with you. So join us on Instagram. Join our Instagram family at Dr. Jade MD. If you're in the Las Vegas area and you're looking for quality healthcare, we'd love to care for you at Inspire Primary Care. We're at inspireprimarycare.com. No I in front of Inspire. Join the YouTube fam at Dr. Jade MD. And as always, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the She Inspires podcast.